Well, we're coming down from the sewage works over here, just behind us to the north, down towards the platform, the rock platform where our study site, where our field site is. We just want to point out some of the things that happen as we come down here relating to the use of this landscape and the archaeology and various other factors. So come down, a couple of things you notice. There's this dark, indurated, probably mineral-rich sediment unit overlain by this typically very sandy upper loose sediment unit. And around about that contact point we get all of this rock showing up. When you look at the rock that's coming out here, it has this really sort of odd appearance to it. I guess you could say it's vesiculated or full of air bubbles. It's a nice example here, and it's sort of rock that you might think of as relatively light. You might think of as maybe a pumice or something like that. And there are other odd indicators here too. You get this very fine, but vitreous, glassy looking rock as well. In this case, we're probably looking at slag in both cases, probably as a result of what coming out of the steel mills, quite likely used as fill during the establishment of the infrastructure here to create a stable base. So of course this doesn't belong here, it's been imported and dumped on this part of the landscape at Red Point. But there are other things here as well that probably relate to different parts of, or different activities, different parts of the past. So there's quite a lot of shell debris around here. It is not very fresh. You can see it's starting to break apart. It's lost the sort of classic color that you expect from fresh shell. It all looks pretty old. It's all badly fragmented. I mean, we know from where we are, sitting 10-15 meters above the water, fragments of shell are unlikely to occur here naturally. It's been a very, very long time since sea level was anything like this high. So these pieces of shell have been brought up here one way or another. Now maybe they come in with a fill, that's quite possible. But alternatively, we also know that there are shell midden sites all up and down the coast in contexts just like this. And if you look away to the south, there's Bass Point down there, which we talk about in the archaeology workshop. It's one of the oldest coastal sites in New South Wales. It has a shell midden sitting on the top, really, really similar to the setting we're in here at Red Point. So it's reasonable to assume there should have been some Aboriginal shell midden material up here once upon a time. But of course we've got these other things taking place here with more recent dumping of material. How we disentangle those is a little tricky. Ideally we'd look at species composition and we'd look at shellfish size, but everything's so badly fragmented here that would be pretty difficult to do. But fortunately we do have these sort of other corroborating elements. So over here there's a nice piece of chert. A few things to say about this one. The chert doesn't belong here. So again, it's found its way here one way or another. It's not river rolled. Edges are really nice and fresh, so it hasn't been abraded. If you think about how fill comes in, it's going to be in the back of a truck, it's going to jumble around, things are going to break up. We expect quite a lot of edge abrasion. We're not seeing on that, but what we are seeing is a series of flake scars moved in different directions, exactly the kind of construction you'd get knocking off flakes off for a stone tool. So in this case we're probably looking at what we'd call a core made of chert, and there are other bits here as well tell a similar kind of story. It's a fragment of a flake. This one's likely silkrete, I think, which we mentioned in the workshop as one of the classic materials you might expect to find in these sort of archaeological sites. Again, the edges are relatively fresh except where they've been snapped off, and you look at the discoloration, I'm sure you can see it there, but that's a very fresh break. Otherwise the edges of this are in reasonably good condition. Almost certainly didn't come in with the fill, otherwise it would be pummeled and turned over and look very different. There's a beautiful flake here as well. Retains all of its classic features, so it's what we call a bulb. So force applied here, the radius scar there, there's the bulb, ventral surface of the flake, and some more scars on the back, indicating it was struck repeatedly from the same point. And again, you know, really nice, intact, sharp edges. These haven't come in with the fill, or at least it's very unlikely given the condition they're in. Which on balance makes you suspect, when you add the context to it and the corroborating archaeological information, that the shell probably is the remains of an Aboriginal shell midden that used to probably span quite a bit of this hilltop. But of course then subsequently, with all of the infrastructure that's been put in here, all of the erosion that's taken place, it's a really nice example of how difficult it is for archaeology to survive into the present in anything like good condition. So the amount of information we can get out of this now, given all of this sort of post-depositional activity, is pretty minimal, but we can at least say that it's quite likely that it remains, I think we can be pretty confident these are the remains of an Aboriginal site that was probably reasonably more extensive across this hill, but that's about all we can do with this now.